back, everybody. We are back. The Working Brother is here for another talk, and this time we have Ruud on here, who is a historian. Welcome to the show, Ruud. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Ruud, and I'm a historian, and my specialty is military history. And I grew up in the 1990s. That's when I went to middle and high school and university, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why I would like to talk about the Yugoslav events back then because. It was very much into the news. That was actually the first war after the Gulf War in Kuwait, which I really followed very intensively.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really interested in all the main characters, main players, what was their backgrounds, what happened in terms of military events, and also the whole vibe of the 1990s.
And you were a
Because
student. You were a student at university. Where were you studying then?
I was Leiden University
Which is in the
in the
Netherlands?
Netherlands. Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. All right. And this was like a military masters, or like just your direction was just military history.
What I when I started the whatever, when I was studying, there was this possibility to do military history as a major. So,
Mm-hmm.
and as I'm very interested from I was very young in this kind of affairs, I chose to do that. So my final thesis was about military history and international affairs.
And this was your master's.
Yes, yes, I have my master's degree.
All right, excellent. So like you obviously know what you're talking about. Um,
Let's say like this. I talk from my wisdom and experience, but take it with a grain of salt in the sense that don't. I'm not the only reference point, of course, but I have an interesting view on things, especially way back then when not only involved in the sense that I am. It was when I was in my formative years, let's say like this, and it was also being treated in university. So I can tell you something about that as well.
all right, excellent. So this was during the 90s that you were at university while the Yugoslav conflict was happening, or the
Yes.
conflicts, we should say, because there were multiple. Um, one of the first ones is the separation of Croatia, which was, if I'm not mistaken, recognized by the Vatican first.
Ah, what was Germany, which was the first.
I think it's the Vatican and then Germany, which
Ah,
makes it which makes it even funnier. Um, Keeping in mind this is a comedy channel and this is all humor. There is
yeah.
nothing here that has to do with reality. So let's get right into it. Why don't you take us along? I'm gonna play both of us plus TV. I'm gonna play a little animation here uh, of Operation Storm, as it was called, which was the ethnic cleansing of Serbian Krajina of Serbs by the Croatian parts of the then JNA or JNA, Yugoslav National Army. Why don't you
Hmm.
take it from there?
Yes. So when I grew up in the 1980s, there was the Cold War, and the Cold War was actually quite structured. If you look back, it was like an age which were has very clear lines, like you had the East and the West. And basically, in the 1980s, it was a kind of like status quo. Like there was not much movement in the world because the world was in
Mm-hmm.
two camps, and that was clear. And there was a kind of equilibrium, if you know what I mean, kind of balance.
Yep.
And then you had the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that led to actually a kind of optimism in the West, at least, that now the whole world would uh, turn to democracy, the free market, and also
Mm-hmm.
this kind of idealism that we would have a kind of world government with the United Nations, in which all countries would basically agree on the same premises, also in international law. And when I was studying university, that was also a kind of the vibe in the law faculty, because I did some international law,
Yep.
and this was being treated very extensively. Like you have international rules, and you have the United Nations, and if we just all those conflicts which are going on are basically kind of like um, a kind of historical heritage which just have to flesh out. We just have to make sure that we just freeze the conflicts. We send UN blue helmets, just like in Lebanon happened, and that would actually just resolve the conflicts. So there was a kind of in the West a kind of optimism that this could be resolved, and that in the end, thanks to international law, democracy, and free markets, everybody would be happy, everybody would be rich, and everybody and all the countries would get along with each other.
Mhm.
And what happened in Yugoslavia is actually the shattering of this dream. And why? Because uh, what happened is that because in the UN Charter it says that you cannot mix into the internal affairs of sovereign states. That is what the United
Yep.
Nations would not do. And in the 1990s, this was basically thrown out of the window because what happened
Mhm.
is that they did interfere in the internal affairs of the state. So what happened is that first Slovenia declared its independence, and it was recognized, and Croatia, and then
Mhm.
Bosnia. And the more it went to the east, the more ethnic conflict erupted because, of course,
Yep.
those communities like Serbians and Croats and Bosniaks, they were all mixed up. It's not like there were very clear lines. I mean, of course, there were pockets of and concentrations of the population, but a lot of people they really lived more or less next to each other. And
Yep.
suddenly, lines were being drawn, and people were arming themselves, and this whole conflict erupted. And what was very telling is that some
If I can interrupt you just for an
yes,
anecdote, which you may not know of, there's a very famous video on the, let's say, Serbo-Croatian speaking internet, as in Serbian, as in Yugoslav language, of the time, of Bosnian and the Serb neighbor in Bosnia saying bye to each other because they had grown up, like, they're in their 80s or 70s, and they had grown up their whole lives together and played as kids, and their families always took care of each other. And now, because of the ethnic cleansing, basically one of them had to be moved, and they were saying bye. And it's a really, really, human video, basically. Go ahead.
yes. So, like you said, I mean, a lot of people grow up with each other, and um, Yugoslavia seemed to be for a long time a very strong and unified state, especially on the Tito.
Mhm.
And basically, what people said in the Western media is that it was the cause, nationalism was the cause, but then they didn't
Yep.
say Croatian nationalism or but it was Serbian nationalism was the problem. So
Always.
it was really kind of one-sided, to be honest, because again, there was Serbian nationalism, but there were also other nationalisms. And actually, it
Mhm.
was really quite interesting because when I delved into the conflict, I also find out that actually a lot of Yugoslav, or at least in the Serbian camp, a lot of people they uh, actually put forward their anti-fascist credentials. Like, for example,
Mhm.
Mladic really said, it's a very famous Serbian general in the Bosnian War. He really said that he grew up as an anti-fascist and he didn't believe in communitarianism. And even somebody like Karadzic, which was also kind of like the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, he became a kind of the leader out of necessity and not so much because he was a very ambitious man or something like that. He
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
not very
He was put
charismatic
in
or
the
something
spot,
like.
basically. He was
Hmm?
put in the spot. It was him or nobody. He was put in the spot. Like, he had to be. He had to be. He had to take charge. It's not his choice, basically. It was a circumstance that brought him there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I will not say he has no ambition, but let's say like this: he doesn't strike me like a very charismatic ultra nationalist or something like that.
Mhm.
I mean, like you said, he was a kind of thrust in this position, and he had to just do whatever he had to do. And it doesn't mean that he's a nice man, or I'm not going to say that everybody is nice or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's just that it's very interesting to see the image which was painted in the West about the conflict and the actual conflict itself, because
Mhm.
all the nationalist tendencies of the Bosniaks and the Croats were really airbrushed away. Like they didn't have ultra nationalists with all kind of agendas about conquest. No, that was just the Serbs. um, and of course the Serbians, they a lot of them, they crave to be in a Serbian dominated state, yeah, logically, but it was not allowed to happen. So um, the borders of a state like Croatia or like Bosnia were like a sacrosanct, meaning that there could be not a breakaway
Yeah.
to the east. But like you said, you had Operation Storm, and that was a kind of the breaking of the Yugoslav dream, I would say, because in Croatia, or what's now Croatia, a lot of Serbs lived there in a region called Krajina, and it's
Mhm.
really quite interesting because the word Krajina in Slavic language means borderland. So
Yeah.
that's why you have
Like the end
Ukra.
of, basically.
Hmm?
The end of, or the end of something, like, or the borderlands, basically, like, is the translation. Yeah. So
Yeah,
like
it,
Ukraina is the Russian borderlands, and Srpska Krajina is obviously the Serbian borderlands
yes.
of the
So it is
of the
borderlands.
historical. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, actually, the borderlands were created by the Habsburg Empire because for a long time the Croatian border was actually the border with the Ottoman Empire, and a lot of
Mhm.
Serbs, they moved into Croatia. That was a kind of military colonies, and they served in the Habsburg army, and that's why they were settled there for many many centuries. This is really a kind of very old community, and they
Yeah.
broke away from the newly independent Croatian state, and they were not allowed to team up with the Serbians brothers in Bosnia, Serbia.
Mhm.
But again, the so what also happened in the breakup of Yugoslavia, that some communities were really protected. For example, you had
Yeah.
this kind of enclaves in the east of Bosnia, which were really protected by blue helmets,
Mhm.
and there was really a lot of international attention to make sure that there was no ethnic cleansing, which is of course we're all against ethnic cleansing, so that's good. But what happened
Yeah.
is that when Serbians were ethnically cleansed, that was okay. That was not a problem, and
Yeah.
that was actually happened during Operation Storm. That the Croatians opened a big military offensive to conquer Krajina, and they managed to do that fairly quickly. And what happened then was a big exodus of Serbs. And what you see is a kind of like what you see in Israel as well, basically, that they say like, yeah, the Serbians were told to go away by their leaders, and that's why we cannot blame for any ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's on the one hand, there's of course a kind of kernel of truth, but on the other hand, we all know like how things play out, and in both cases, there is a kind of push and pull factor, and but what it boils down to is, of course, that those people, they could not go back. I mean, there's not like a right. So that is very was very telling back then, that this kind of double standard, and that some countries, their borders were sacrosanct and they had to be respected, and others were not, and some communities were protected by all means, and other communities, they were actually left to fend for themselves.
Mhm.
So in my personal, yeah, I thought that, I thought it very wrong, let's say like
Do
this.
you know do you know about the history of well, you do probably because you studied history, but the history of, let's say, Croatian fascism and the Ustaše and the
Yeah, because
concentration
I did
camps.
a I did a a video on that, and it's really quite interesting because the Croatians, for
Hmm.
example, they had their own
That's
nationalism.
right. I don't think we told the viewers that you have a YouTube channel, which we'll link somewhere at some point
Hmm.
in this video.
Yes,
Excellent.
yes.
And don't forget to subscribe and like and share.
Thank you very much for the
I
shout
always
out.
forget to do that, man. I always forget to tell people to subscribe, like, and share. And we'll leave links definitely to Rue's channel. Go on. Sorry,
Yeah.
I often get told off by my subscribers that I interrupt my guests too much.
No, no, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you for the shout out. It's really appreciated. So I delved into this Croatian nationalism, and it because it's really quite interesting because Croatians regard the Bosniaks as Croatians. So despite the fact that they are Muslims, they
Hmm.
regard them as Croatians. And what happened during the Second World War is that the Germans they would try to recruit the Bosniaks, so the Muslims
Hmm.
in the region in Bosnia, in their army units. But then the Croatian government would say like, yeah, but you have to name them as Croatian army units. You have to really emphasize that these are Croatians and not a separate nationality or something like that. So the Croatians, even during the 1990s, had their own plans about a greater Croatia because
Hmm.
you had like the Catholic Croatians in Bosnia, but they also thought that they could incorporate Bosnia as because the Croatians they were allowed to have their own state in the Balkans during the Second World War, and that encompassed modern day Croatia and modern day
Yeah.
Bosnia as one state. And this state uh, was led by Ante Pavelic, which was I thought he was a priest or whatever. Anyway, he was really supported by the Catholic Church. There was a big support for that, and yeah, they had their own militia. And what is little well known in the West, by the way, is that the Second World War in Yugoslavia was very, very bloody. That 1 out of 10 people died during the conflict, which was really
Yeah.
very high. And there was a lot of intercommunal
If I can
violence.
just cut you off, if I
Yeah,
can just cut you off for a second, I just want to shout out here in the background to Graham Phillips, whose videos we're playing, who did a very good report on the subject of Thompson and the modern Ukrainian problem of sorry, Ukrainian, huh? So used to talking about Ukrainian fascists. The Croatian problem with fascists that's modern. In any case, you can continue.
yeah,
It's very not known. You're absolutely right. Yeah, very few people in the West do know about the casualties that were inflicted on Yugoslavia that were either you know, civilian
yeah,
and or military.
yes. So what you're referring to is that, and that's really actually quite interesting. So you have this kind of history of collaboration and also ultranationalism with Croatia. And
Hmm.
what's also interesting, and that was also in the 1990s, something which really quite shocked me, is that it was allowed to be ultra far right in Croatia as long as it was against the Serbs. So
Yeah,
actually,
just like the
what I read,
Nazis now in Ukraine. Just like the Nazis, as long as you're Nazi against the Russians, then it's okay to be a Nazi. You know,
hmm,
like I mean,
yeah,
openly Nazi.
yeah. So what I read in the newspaper back then, because back then all the news went over the newspaper, we didn't have the
Yeah.
internet yet, is that there were like German new, actually new Nazis all over Western Europe, which were being recruited to fight for
Hmm.
Croatia.
Yeah.
And so when in 2014-15 this whole conflict broke out in Ukraine, it was a kind of deja vu. Like it is allowed to be a far right, crazy new Nazi as long as you're
Hmm.
against the Russians.
Yeah.
And because when I grew up in the 1980s, this whole Second World War morality came into existence. Actually, that was really quite late in the 20th century. I would say the
Yeah.
1980s, and the biggest taboo was this kind of far right fascism. So if you see it, then just after in the 1990s in Croatia. I mean, of course, not all Croatian nationalists are Nazis, or vice versa, but
Mhm.
still, it was being a kind of allowed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yes, that really quite shocked me, to be honest. So I mean, the nationalists, sorry, the Serbians also have their fair share of nationalists and Nazi groups. We don't want to blend that out, but still,
Yeah, of course.
i-
there's Vichy French everywhere, man. Especially these modern times.
mm,
There's Vichy French everywhere.
but what I meant to say is that I don't want to say like the one group is good, the other is bad, or there's no baddies in the others, or something like that.
Well,
It's
yeah,
just that
there's always extremes of both sides found everywhere. You know, there you can have
yes, yes.
extreme pacifists and extreme activists. You know, that can have either political opinion regardless of where they're from. You know,
Yes.
so
So, but it's just that for because the Croatia was supposed to be the western side, the goodies.
hmm
So
the
it's
good
really
guys,
quite,
yeah.
yeah, it's really quite disturbing if they are supposed to be the goodies that they have so many bad apples. You know what I mean?
hmm
So yeah, that actually quite shocked me. But again, so the next episode, what happened, mm, is actually the Kosovo, because that was more of a breakaway than Bosnia and Croatia were, because
Wait, but you skipped Bosnia, man. You can't skip Bosnia and
you can
Osama
skip
bin
Bosnia.
Laden.
Yeah, that what also happened, and that's also quite ironic in hindsight, is that of course the Bosnian Muslims
hmm
also attracted like jihadis from the Afghan war, and
Yeah.
because that was also in the 1980s when I grew up. When I grew up in the
hmm
1980s, there was the Afghan war, and you
Yeah.
even had a movie called Rambo 3, which was
hmm
Afghanistan, and then the Mujahideen, the radical Islamists, they were supposed to be the goodies, you know.
Yeah.
And in the 1990s, that was a kind of like also allowed to happen in Bosnia to some extent, that those Mujahideen would go there to fight for the Muslim case. So in
Yeah.
hindsight, that's really quite ironic, because then 9/11 happened, and then suddenly they were the baddies. So
hmm
because you can see the same with Saddam Hussein. I mean, he was being propped up by America until he invaded Kuwait, and then suddenly he was the next.
Exactly.
I should say the next Hitler. I reflect, how can the next Hitler come to be? Oh yeah, he was
Yeah.
supported by you know what. So yeah,
hmm
I'm very, and that's also what I mean, like by the 1980s, with this whole morality of the Second World War, then people started to identify the next Hitlers, if you know what I mean. So Saddam
Yeah.
Hussein was the first next Hitler which had to be eliminated. And if we just
hmm
eliminated all the Hitlers in the world, then the world would be good. So, and then you had in the 1990s, then the Serbian nationalism
A
as the
small
boogeyman.
Yeah. Sorry about
So
that.
that's also kind of framed in the same way, like, yeah, Milosevic, or is the kind of the next Hitler. You want to make a greater Serbia, like the Germans want to make a greater Germany.
hmm
Um, and yeah, but what was little well known, but that's also what I find out by collecting newspaper clips, is that the Bosniaks, especially Izetbegovic, they were also kind of involved with the Second World War. That you had this kind of Bosnian Muslim units. I mean, that was really
There were
little well
Nazi.
known
You
in the.
you you forgot the no Nazi word. There were Bosnian Muslim Nazi units. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, they were part of the most extreme part of the German army, the SS. So, and I mean, basically what happened is that they got a carte blanche to go against the Serbs. That was happened in the Second World War. So there was a lot of
In
bad
the
blood.
background, in the background, I just want to clue the people in. We're playing a video from BBC, as you can see, Bosnia, cradle of modern jihadism. also known as Mujahideen. That's when they were still known as Mujahideen. Like if you want to actually find
Mm.
the pictures, you look for Bosnian Mujahideen, and you find pictures of, you know, Mujahideen from the Middle East and from Afghanistan, including apparently Osama bin Laden himself, who had, come to Bosnia to practice and train and so on. Um, all of these guys had been to Bosnia in the 90s. Just like now, we're finding yesterday or the day before in Ukraine, they had, what were they? ISIS, Daesh, as they're called, ISIL fighters popping up in Ukraine with their little jihadi flags on their patches. Have you seen that? It was
Yeah, I
yesterday or
saw
the
it.
day
I saw
before.
it. Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
just to clue everybody in. Basically, that's why we're discussing this, because not only am I from Yugoslavia, formerly now from Serbia, but also because the parallels are unbelievable. The
Yes.
Yugoslavia breakup was a blueprint basically for everything that was done since then, including Ukraine and Libya and Syria and so on and so forth. So, who better to talk to than to Rube? Rude, tell us more.
Yes. So again, so when I was studying law, this was really still being taught about article. No, this is chapter 4 and 6. No, chapter 5 and 6 interventions, or at least deployments of blue helmets and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and with the Yugoslav case. So what I did, that was in 1999. No, it was just after the Kosovo intervention. So there was a Kosovo, there was an uprising of the Albanians there, and
Mm-hmm.
then you had this kind of intervention, which was different from Bosnia and Croatia, because Yugoslavia was a federation and not a unitary state. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, the framework for Croatian and Bosnian independence was already kind of there. They just had to say like, okay, we don't want to have anything to do with Belgrade, but we want to be independent. But in Kosovo, it was different. Kosovo was part of Serbia,
Yeah.
and it was not part of the Yugoslav Federation.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really kind of like clear cut separatism.
Yeah.
And what happened is that in the West, you came have this kind of doctrine of responsibility to protect R2P,
Yeah.
and
They
that
invented
became,
that.
yes, and they started saying like, yeah, we have to prevent an imminent genocide in Kosovo. At least that was how it was being presented, and for
Yeah.
that reason, we have to bomb Serbia, and that was done by NATO. So, and it was actually the first time, by the way, parallels all over the place. It was the first time that Germany became involved in this kind of operations.
Let me tell you something
Uh,
that you might not know. The first shots by German soldiers fired in anger after World War II were in Kosovo, where after the bombing campaign or whatever, the peacekeepers shot a Serbian car up with civilians inside and killed people on the inside. Something
mm,
like 50 or 150 or some ridiculous number of ammunition shots were fired that day. And for everybody who's watching, in the background, we had running some footage of the bombing of Belgrade and Yugoslavia. Keep going, Guru, keep going.
yeah. Another interesting parallel is that back then it was the first time that the Green Party in Germany was in the government. And back
I
then, the
didn't know
Green
that.
Party, yeah, and the Green Party, the foreign minister was from the Green Party, Joschka Fischer, and he was the
Okay.
one who's greenlighted the involvement of Germany into the Kosovo War. So you can see the parallel with nowadays, that the Green Party is the war party in Germany.
Yeah.
Every time the Green Party is in the government, Germany goes to war.
Like 5, 6 years ago, when they started talking about Agenda 2030 and like the Green Initiative and everything, You know, Alex Jones and all these other conspiracy theories were saying that it's the green fascism. You know what I mean? That they're going to take
Mm,
away our rights to do anything based on saving the planet. You know what I mean? And from
yes.
that aspect, I kind of saw it coming, but I didn't see it coming in the literally like militaristic, Green Party. But like now that you draw the parallel that it's rooted basically back then, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really ironic to see, because the Green Party started actually in Germany as part of not only the environment movement, but also the peace movement against the atomic bombs in Germany.
Yeah.
So it's a quite a turnaround. But what I also saw with my own eyes is that the Green
Mhm.
Party used to be a radical left party, being like having anarchists and all other kinds of leftist people in. And during my studies, it more and more became a very bourgeois party, basically, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
More like higher educated middle class people.
Mhm.
So not so much the squatter types, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because when I
No.
was studying, that was
n-
still the case, that there would be squatters or former squatters being the cadre of the Green Party. But nowadays that's
Mhm.
no longer the case. That's over. So they went also through a kind of transformation, and you have this kind of career politicians like Beerbock, which are just being scouted. They don't come from environmentalist group or something like that. No, they are being scouted, and do you want to run for the Green Party? And they will just say yes. And but they
Yeah,
could
yeah.
they could also just run for another party if they were being scouted for another party. I mean, those people that just will say anything. Um, but nevertheless, the Green Party is the war party in Germany.
Mm.
Um, and
It seems like it
in
now.
Yes, and what happened is that in Kosovo, basically the UN Charter was basically thrown out of the window, meaning that without actually there was not an unanimity regarding this intervention. It was just done uh, on the own initiative by NATO countries,
Mhm.
and it
There
it
was
it,
no
it
UN
threw
vote about it. It was like
no
illegally
yes
declared and so on and so forth. Yeah.
yes and the fact and it was like in an age also when the United States was the sole superpower,
That
basically,
was
because
3 days
Russia was
ago.
in tatters with Yeltsin and China was still
Yeah.
developing.
We're not at
So
vote.
there was no counterweight to correct this, to saying like
Mhm.
this is wrong, we should not intervene. And what happened is is actually that what's happening right now is actually had its root in that era, because China really realized, like, okay, this is something which this kind of unilateralism, because that's what it boils
Yeah.
down to, is going to pose problems. And they became acutely aware of this when, because the Chinese, in my opinion, but maybe history will tell, let's say like this,
Mhm.
the Chinese were tacitly helping the Serbians in this war. And I think one of the things which they did, but again I cannot really prove it, is that they allowed the Serbian army to use the Chinese, because NATO bombed all the communications,
Mhm.
so it was really hard to communicate, of course, at some stage.
Yeah.
And
They bombed the
what
TV
the
station as well.
yeah,
I
they
have
bombed. They
video.
bombed everything.
Mhm.
They bombed everything. They bombed bridges, enterprises, everything. So, and that's also
Earlier,
kind of
just to throw in a little background for everybody. Earlier, I had a video playing of NATO bombing a civilian train, as in like a passenger train on a bridge, and they hit the train and the bridge 6 times. Graham Phillips did a report about it many years after with some of the survivors. And like Ruud said, we've got queued footage of. Well, among other things, the Chinese embassy, which I don't know if people know, some people might not know, thanks to AP Archive for the footage. We've got the Chinese embassy, which is, not far that way, um, which was bombed by accident. because they had old maps supposedly, and the Chinese diplomats were killed. And like you
Now
said, I don't think.
the embassy was already evacuated, so the only staff which were left were the people from the
No, no, there was some
communications.
killed.
Yeah, there was
There were
some
some
killed,
people killed.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. But it was not like people were working there or something like that. I
No,
mean,
no,
in
it
the
was at
sense
night.
that
Yeah, 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 yeah,
it was
yeah,
not like a normal working activity. But what happened, in my opinion, is that they allowed the Serbians to use the antenna, the communications.
That's one conspiracy, and the other, I mean, theory, and the other is that I think it happened after the downing of the 117. You know,
Yeah, the
F-117
stealth
stealth.
bomber.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the conspiracy theories is that the parts of it were sent to the embassy to be stored there to like be safe from bombing. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, of course. And the Chinese would definitely be interested in this technology. Yeah.
That's that's one conspiracy, and the other one is that the wreckage of the 117 was put in a Masonic building. I can't remember which building it was, but it's a Masonic building in Belgrade, because after X amount of days, they noticed the Serbians or Yugoslav noticed that the NATO was not bombing Masonic buildings. So they
Oh,
so like
okay.
those are two conspiracy theories that I've heard about the
Mm.
wreckage of the F-117.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, what what you just told is very important. That back then, and I can still remember it very well, that
Mhm.
the NATO had a problem, and the problem was the fact that there was no land border with Serbia from which they could attack the country from land, and that was also would be very difficult.
Yeah.
That was something which they wouldn't want, so they would try to win this war from the air, like bombing it,
Mhm.
and then they came to a problem that the Serbian army, spread out and didn't offer any valuable targets, and they hit very well,
Yeah.
and NATO started really bombing actually everything, like you said, radio, television, transport
I just
network.
wanna I just wanna play a little video in the background of the spirit of the Yugoslav Serb people, who, like, when they started getting bombed, decided to go and protest on bridges. And no bridges in Belgrade were destroyed, but other bridges in the country, in all other cities, were taken out. And the people under bombing for 78 days would collect and make rock concerts everywhere, including on the bridges that were going to be bombed. As to deter the people, the bombing, basically. Just
Yes,
just
I,
wanted to say that.
yes, I remember that also very clearly from the news reporting, and that was also the like. I mean, in terms of international law, which they always evoke, this was really like throwing the rule book out of the window, like
Mhm.
attacking a sovereign country with internal affairs without any UN mandate, and also
Yeah.
bombing just the shit out of Serbia. I mean, um, in the sense that they really were just wrecking the country, just like bombing just
Yeah.
anything which they could hit. And I know I had because back then I followed a course in university, and that was given by somebody which was working for NATO,
Mhm.
and he told us some stories. For example, that Jamie Shea, which was the spokesman for the
Spokesman.
NATO, so he gives them
Mhm.
the daily press briefings. He was just making things up. He was just because there was nothing to report, and I can still
I
remember it
didn't.
very
I
clearly.
don't. I don't have inside information like you do, but as a kid, then as a child, watching it happen, and watching Jamie Shea on a daily basis, because I spoke English even back then, and hearing, 78 tanks today, 32 pieces of armor, etc., etc., and then hearing the Serbian report, like, we lost one tank, and there was we shot down four airplanes. you know, um, it was then that I realized, basically, like, in these kind of high propaganda situations, you can't really focus. You can't really like lay any credibility to the numbers on either side until the thing
Mm.
is over and until like at least 5 years have passed and all the like stuff has been checked by open source, and then you can maybe think about talking about casualties and reality on the ground.
Yeah, true, true. But what I knew back then, because I was already kind of educated,
Flip
is
yourself.
oh, sorry.
Flip yourself.
Yes.
There you go.
So what I knew back then is that the Serbian army would not present a target, and what happened is
Mhm.
that at some stage, and you can look it up, NATO said like, yeah, we have destroyed 2 battalions of Serbian infantry or something like that,
Yeah.
and I said like, yeah, that's unbelievable because the Serbs were not doing that; they were not offering any targets. And later,
Mhm.
I got this confirmed by this guy, which was
Yeah.
teaching in university, that this was just nonsense. So I felt vindicated. And
Another interesting video I would just want to throw in there. This AP archive again. Kosovo KLA, which is the Kosovo Liberation Army. Watch as NATO bombs Serb positions. So what this means for the people who might be like not as old as we are, this is the exactly the same as if NATO was bombing Syrian government positions while ISIS was filming and providing the footage to AP. Yeah. So like that gives you an idea of like the complexity of the Yugoslav wars during that time. Not to mention that they were all being trained by random people, random European armies.
mhm. Yeah, so when I mean, of course, I don't like the war in Ukraine, and what happens is just one big tragedy. But
Mhm.
one of the things which really come into my mind when I hear Western countries condemning Russia is like the Yugoslav campaign against Serbia in 1999. Like, I mean, who threw the rule book out of the window? I mean, why you think you have the moral high ground? Because what Putin did when before he uh, ordered the Russian army to go into Ukraine is actually
Mhm.
invoking exactly what happened in Kosovo, saying like there's an imminent threat to the Donbass
Yes and
region,
no.
and
Yes and
and
no,
we
because it's on his border. The difference is it's on his border. It's not, it's not
yeah, of
halfway
course,
across the world. There's a bit of a nuance there.
of course. But what I mean to say is that he deliberately invoked this because he knew that anybody watching him would remember this and would really
Yeah.
know, like, okay, this is something which the West did, and now we are doing the same. So what can you say? And even in terms of morality, because what
Mhm.
Putin did is also like what I told you before about the Second World War morality in the West. Like this is, we will never want to happen this again with Nazism. He also invoked that. Like we
Yeah.
want to denazify. We don't want to have this anymore. No, never again. And actually, what Putin did in 2022 was actually what Stalin proposed with the West for Germany in 1945, meaning like demilitarization and denazification.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and that's very interesting parallel, I think, because in the post World War II order, it was being accepted that never again fascism and never again war, and now this actually has been totally destroyed. This
The
consensus.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the people don't care. You can be a super duper crazy jihadi or a super duper crazy neo-Nazi as long as you fight against the white people. I mean that's no problem apparently.
The
So
Slavs. Yeah. The Slavs.
yeah, it's not the
Depends where
Chinese.
you are, you know. The shades that it's okay. It depends on where your geographical location is. You know, if you're in Syria, then it's as long as you're killing Christians, it's okay. It doesn't matter what shade they are. You know,
Yes, but I mean
it's a
it's
crazy
just
time that we
that.
live in.
Yeah, yeah, because again, like I said, I mean that's what we grow up with, and it was just thrown
Mhm.
out of the window. With a lot of things. So for me, in the beginning of the century, the 21st century, It was a kind of a broken boulevard, or a boulevard of broken promises, let's say like this.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, the Kosovo crisis heralded actually also like the post 9/11 world, that America would just do the things which they seem fit to do, no matter what, no
Mhm.
matter the, because nowadays, for example, the United Nations is totally irrelevant. Nobody even talks about it. And the same is with blue helmets. I mean, when I was following this course in 1999 and 2000, this was
Mhm.
still a thing, like the blue helmets and United Nations and United Nations resolutions. And nowadays,
It
nobody
meant
even talks
something.
about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It actually meant something. And nowadays, nobody talks about the United Nations anymore. Nobody talks about resolutions anymore. And nobody talks about blue helmets anymore. It's just all out of the window. And in the 1980s and 1990s, the Secretary General of the United Nations used to be a figure of authority, and actually respected by most countries. And and
Yeah.
and the irony, I mean, the irony is, for example, that the Chinese, they were willing. I don't know if it's 2018 or anyway, with the United Nations anniversary, to really actually celebrate the United Nations Foundation and everything. The Chinese of all people. So apparently, they really quite still care about it, although since the beginning of the century, nobody cares it actually anymore. Just it's just all out of the window. And what we see now, I think, is a kind of, because in the 1990s we think like we have the Cold War behind us. We don't have this kind of division in the world anymore
Mhm.
with communism, so that's out of the window, and we finally can go to a kind of brighter future with, yeah, whatever you think, but at least not like this kind of cruel division and proxy wars which you had in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And now we are totally back to the Cold War, to be honest. And
Yeah.
the irony is that during the Cold War, Yugoslavia was regarded as pro-Western, which is also
Yeah.
quite ironic.
Compared to the East, yes. Like generally speaking, Yugoslavia, as like under Tito, was like neither considered East or West. It wasn't part of the Eastern Bloc, and it wasn't, buddy buddy with the West. But at the same time, it was at one point highly financed by the West, and in how should I say, intimate cooperation with the East. But at the same time, don't forget that the non-aligned movement was started, among other things, by Yugoslavia.
Definitely, because a lot of people think like third world, that's the children with flies on their faces. But actually,
Mhm.
the third world was a concept of non-aligned nations like India, Indonesia, and also
Yeah.
Yugoslavia, which want to be neither in the Western Bloc nor in the Eastern Bloc. So it's not like
Mhm.
pitiful countries in Africa. No, this was really a truly a thing. But it also should be noted, and I think it's also quite ironic, is that when
Mhm.
Tito moved a little bit more westward, or moved westward in the 1950s, that there was a kind of de-Stalinization in Yugoslavia. And this de-Stalinization was not a very pretty affair. There was even like people put in camps, and it was really very cruel and very tough.
Yeah.
But Tito got a good press. They didn't care if he was killing people or putting people behind barbed wire, as long as he put the right people behind the barbed wire. So the
Yeah.
desalinization of Yugoslavia, I saw one time a documentary, was a very cruel and very brutal affair. But Tito just got all the good press, and nevertheless, yeah, it was really quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah, he
So
was definitely an agent of the West, various degrees during his career. Let's put it that way, to like be politically correct about it. But like, there's a lot of during that time of Yugoslavia, which is not that you know public. Let's put it that way.
yeah, I mean that's a lot of people that don't understand. They have no idea about what happened in the last century in Yugoslavia, and
Mhm.
it has a lot of cruel chapters. I mean, this kind of intercommunal violence was already happening during the First World War.
Mhm.
Uh, that the Austrian-Hungarian army was really brutal in its occupation of Serbia, and it's really very little known actually. And again, then you have the rerun in the Second World War. And anyway, there's a lot. There's a lot of history. Um,
You know, one of the other parallels with the Yugoslav conflicts, or at least the Kosovo aspect of the Yugoslav conflicts, and the current thing going on in Ukraine is the organ harvesting
Point
claims
qu'on a
and
parfois du mal à la
his.
prendre au sérieux. Ça n'a pas toujours servi le tribunal pénal international dont elle a été pendant 8 ans le procureur. Carla Del Ponte vient donc de publier ses mémoires. On s'attendait à ce qu'elle règle des comptes et on n'est pas déçu. Elle avait promis des révélations. Elle tient ses promesses, même au-delà de ce qu'on imaginait. Elle dénonce, par exemple, un trafic d'organes en Europe. Et il implique les dirigeants actuels du Kosovo, le nouvel État indépendant que la France a reconnu sans attendre plus longtemps. Vincent Roux.
Okay, so there you have a report from LCI France, and it's talking about it. And then if we switch to the next tab, you've got um, Bernard Kushner answering
ah,
questions about it,
La vente des organes. Mais vous êtes malade,
selling
non
organs.
J'ai une tête à vendre des
Are you
organes, moi.
sick?
Mais vous êtes fou, vous croyez n'importe
You're
quelle connerie.
crazy.
Alors, Rada et
You're
moi,
talking nonsense.
on aurait volé des cadavres pour vendre des organes, mais à
Oh,
qui
of course we're gonna steal them from cadavers. Of course we're gonna sell cadavers. You know, it's funny because the truth comes out at the end, and
I could tell you an
all
interesting
these
story about.
narratives are just too familiar. You know what I mean?
Yes, I can tell you an interesting story about because Kushner, he used to be the founder of the Doctors Without Borders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And did you know that actually the Doctors Without Borders lost its neutral veneer during the Kosovo crisis? You know what happened?
They were reporting on positions, I think, for artillery, just like the
Yeah,
OSCE in Ukraine.
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but I'm talking not about the agents within the organization, but about the organization itself. That
Mm-hmm.
There were Greek doctors, and the Greek
Okay.
doctors, they want to help everybody, so they also want to help the Serbs. So they really want
Mm-hmm.
to go to Serbia to help the population, do the bombardments. And then the
Yeah.
Doctors Without Borders, they threw the Greek chapter out.
Yeah. You know, we've been going for like 52 minutes. For anybody who's still with us, thank you for being still with us. Thumbs up. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Find the link to his channel as well. But before we get, too long and before we forget about it, let's put it that way. I want to say that one of the lasting results, let's say one of, because there are many, of the whole NATO campaign against Yugoslavia and Serbia is Camp Bondsteel, for those who may not be aware, which is a huge base that was occupied by American and other forces in Kosovo, which is still occupied to this day. And yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to that because people, think maybe that was something that happened a long time ago and it doesn't have any, geostrategic importance. But like the biggest American base after the one in Germany, remind me what it's called. What's the one in Germany called?
Ramstein?
Ramstein. The biggest American base other than Ramstein is the one in Kosovo. Just for the record, for people to be aware. And again, this is Graham Phillips footage because he went there recently. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to that because it was one of the videos that I had lined up for our little talk, so that we can mention that as well. Keep going.
Yeah, like you said, I mean that there are geopolitical interests at work, and not only morality. And of
Mhm.
course, that's to some extent you can understand. But um, what was really something interesting back then with the Kosovo crisis was again the role of Russia.
Mhm.
So that Russia went to because they were involved with the peacekeeping force in Bosnia. And
Yeah.
when the Yugoslav war ended, in the sense that the Kosovo crisis ended in 1999, the Russians, they
Mhm.
went from Bosnia and they went right away to Pristina to help the
Yeah.
Serbian population, which was beleaguered by the rebels over there, and it
Yep.
was really quite impressive back then. At least I can
They
still remember it very vividly.
they went like I think they got there faster than the NATO troops who were coming from Greece,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
which
yeah.
is close.
Yes, yeah. You had the Russian VDV. They went to the airport and they really installed themselves very quickly.
Hmm.
And it was really
And
because
apparently, James Blunt, like the singer. James Blunt was among the British troops who were there. I'm pretty sure it was
interesting.
him. I'm pretty sure it's James Blunt. He's a musician, like from like I can't remember the name of the band now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he was deployed there. That's number one, and number two, the UK troops were ordered to shoot at the Russians apparently by the Americans, and the UK troops disobeyed orders from the Americans because they said they're not going to start World War III because of American orders, basically. That's something that's been said, and it's also worth mentioning that many of today's heroes of like the blogosphere, of the Russian blogosphere, actually participated in some of these VDV operations in the 90s in
Mm,
Kosovo.
yes.
Like, if I'm not mistaken, Strelkov was also there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yes, because it should be said that Serbia felt let down by Russia in the 1990s because Russia was very
yeah,
weak and
mhm,
divided, and that this was like the first time that the Serbians felt supported by Russia again. This was really a
yeah,
big propaganda coup by the Russians in
mhm,
support of Serbia because I can still remember that very well. Um, but still, nevertheless, Kosovo until this very day, because recently you had this spat about the northern part. I don't know the Mitrovica, the city in the north of
yeah,
Kosovo, and that's majority Serb, but they're not allowed to separate from Kosovo. It's not like the Kosovos can how should I say can separate from
Y-
Serbia, but the people inside of Kosovo they cannot separate from Kosovo. That's
yeah,
not allowed.
yeah, yeah.
So
There's
this kind of double standard is always present in this
you know
conflict.
there's that double standard is present. Yes, I agree with you 100%. But the point is, like, the Serbs in the north of Kosovo don't want to separate from Kosovo and join Serbia.
Ah,
They want to
interesting. I
stay.
did not.
They like cause in the Serbian psyche, let's put it that way, but primarily in the Serbian constitution, Kosovo is integral part of Serbia. Like, it's in the constitution, and so like there's no you know if and or but like there's no debating it, like it's a part of Serbia, end of story.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the de jure situation and the de facto situation are very different, but the Serbs in Kosovo, I sincerely doubt, which is a very nice way of saying I'm absolutely sure, don't want to break away to become part of bigger Serbia, because they're already a part of Serbia in their mind and under Serbian law, technically. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, I totally understand what you say. It's just that the Kosovo police try to assert their authority on this region, which they don't have
Mhm.
in full control. So what I mean to
Yeah.
say is that um, that the Serbians they don't allow themselves to be ruled over by the Kosovo in the separatists. What it boils down to. So that's very interesting. Yes. So, what was the next topic you would like to discuss in this context?
I think we've covered so much that I think we're gonna wind it down. But
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to bring up the shooting down of the F-117.
Mm-hmm.
Back then I was a lot younger, like in my teens, let's say, and you say that there was no internet, but there was internet.
Yeah, it was
Um,
in its it was
very
really
very
primitive.
infant days, yeah,
Yes.
and and there were some Serbian websites even back then that you could log into and chat. And then there was also MIRC. I don't know if you remember MIRC, which was like a telegram of its day, basically
Yes, yes.
a telegram of its day, and that was the main source of information back then, like for
Mhm.
people who were abroad, and because like you can't hear anything on CNN or BBC or other news, and only a certain, let's say, category of people had satellite TV back then. So like most people would get their information either from relatives over things like ICQ, if you remember ICQ.
Yeah, ICQ.
Um,
Yes.
and
Oh
and
my
and
goodness.
and either that or from MIRC chat. And this was a video and song that was done to
Ja bol
celebrate
som stelka 117.
the shooting down of the stealth, and it's sung from the perspective of the American pilot. So if you allow me, I'll briefly play it and then translate a little bit maybe as we go along. So I'm the pilot of the 117A. The it's the shining pride of NATO, and it's the invisible jet with which I bomb Serbians. But one night I was noticed unexpectedly with the help of radar or something else. Fuck knows. Somebody really fucked me up. They told me that the anti-air doesn't work. And then something exploded underneath me. I thought it was my clutch, and it got broken. Of the invisible stealth airplane. So what did I do? I cried as I fell to the ground, down to the fields full of farmers with their forks. They're gonna kill me when they find me. And I came here just because of Clinton. Oh, another anecdote. This is just for the Serbs that are watching, because that song is going to bring back a lot of memories. But the point is, Bill Clinton. Did you know that the day the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke was the day that most bombs were dropped on Yugoslavia, Serbia, then?
No, no.
And I say Yugoslavia, Serbia because it was called Yugoslavia, because it was still
Yeah,
had Montenegro in it and Kosovo,
and
and it was
Macedonia.
called Yugoslavia. No, no, it didn't have Macedonia. Macedonia had already split up.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I was mistaken.
yeah, Macedonia already split up, but they're the only one who split up peacefully. And then later Montenegro split up peacefully. But the point is, at this time, like during the bombing, it was mostly Serbia. Like some of Montenegro was bombed, but it was mostly Serbia that was bombed. But it was technically still called Yugoslavia. That's why when I speak about it, I say Yugoslavia slash Serbia.
Yes, I know,
But
because it was still a federation name.
I've actually seen bits of this F-117 in the museum. They have an aeronautical museum here, and you can go and they have pieces of the cockpit and pieces of the wing in the museum. I have pictures somewhere. You can find them online, I'm sure. In
There's a
any
very,
case,
very interesting anecdote about this, because what the
go
Serbians
on.
did was to switch off the radars. They really
Hmm.
they didn't turn it on. They only turned it on. They had spotters, and they would only turn it
Yeah,
on at the last moment when they're really overhead and really shoot, to really try to hit and not
yeah,
give them any target by turning on the radar.
yeah, exactly. All right, Ruud, I think we've gone for, what is it now, 1 hour and 5 minutes. I think we've covered a lot about the Yugoslav conflict of the 90s, or the conflicts of the 90s because there were multiple conflicts and pieces of peace and like pauses in between. But it was all one basically plan, which may have been, may or may not. There's conspiracy theories from the time of Reagan put into place, and that whole economic hitman story. But that's all conspiracy theory, like everything else on this channel. Russian propaganda and conspiracy theories. um, Ruud, thank you for visiting. I hope that
Thank
we will
you for
talk
having
again
me.
very soon. This was an excellent talk, and it was only the first of the four main topics that we want to discuss with Ruud, which will include definitely the Donbass rebellion, the new Cold War just before the special military operation, and the military aspects of the war in Ukraine, or the special military operation, or the Russian invasion of Ukraine by Putler. Putler, the evil. The evil. You know, when I've said this before on my lives, but I'll say it again to you. Um, when the whole thing happened and all the anti-Russian propaganda started, and the Russians are evil and we should kill all Russians, um, was the norm in Europe. All the Russians were like, "Oh my God, how can they be so racist?" And all the Serbians were like, "Oh, first time," you know, because like in lots of Northern European countries, the criminals are always from Yugoslavia or Serbia specifically, and Serbs are always the like crazy bad guys. So yeah, I grew up in the Middle East where during the 90s when we were known as Muslim killers among other things. So yeah, I know how the propaganda machine works.
Yeah, it was very one-sided. That's what my main
Yeah,
point is. That I will not say that the how should I say, that all Croats are bad and all Serbians are good, or
yeah,
vice versa. For me, it's just disequilibrium. Like, you should look at the bad and the good on all sides. And
exactly.
yeah, the most important message which I bring across in this interview is just that if you look at the current conflict, you should know that the rule book was thrown out of the window a long time before this conflict happened. And that's also what Putin alluded to when he made his speech to invade or to basically start a military operation in Ukraine. Is that he said that I have a responsibility to protect, just like with the Kosovars in Serbia. He
Mhm.
of course he didn't speak it out, but for the audience, it's very clear.
Yeah.
And he just exercises his right, whether he has a mandate or not. And you can agree or disagree, but again, he tried to, because Putin, he likes judo, and in judo you
Mhm.
use the force of your enemy against him, and that's also what he does. A lot of times
Yeah.
he does that in his speeches and in his actions, that he
Mhm.
just throw the enemies or his opponents morality in his face, like, say, see what you did, and I'm doing the same, and what can you do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No, Putin is a master chess player. That's all I can say. But yeah, judo as well, in the sense that, like, exactly as you said, he uses the enemy's strength against them, which was, something that I think we've been seeing on the battlefield as well. But we'll definitely talk about that in upcoming episodes when Ruud comes back. I'm gonna play some music, and I'm gonna say, Ruud, tell us what your YouTube channel is. There'll be a link, but you can tell it. And if you have any other ways people can follow you.
yeah, so I have a Facebook page under my own name, and
All right.
my topic is military history, and more in particular the First and Second World War, but also other episodes in history. And I try to talk objectively about all these kind of topics to have a better understanding about history, because that's my main purpose as a historian, is to really clarify, to give context to history, rather than moralistic take sides or something like that. That's not
Yeah.
my main goal, not at all, actually.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Ruud. I'm gonna play some music here, and we can take it out.
Okay,
See
thank
you
you.
later, everybody. Like, share, and subscribe.